Do you like worms? Do you have worms? Did you eat worms as a kid? If you answered yes to any or all of those questions, then look no further, because I got the dopest worm in the galaxy coming your way. Earthworm Jim is a character created by Doug TenNapel. He made a sketch of the guy and presented it to Shiny Entertainment, who was developing a game for Playmates Toys, trying to capitalize on the success of their Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle line, but with their own original IP. A programmer, David Perry, was so impressed with the sketch, they bought the rights to Earthworm Jim and thus started production of the superhero worm. The original game was developed simultaneously for the SNES and Genesis, but both versions having some key differences, namely in resolution, sound effects, graphics, and even an exclusive bonus level on the Genesis. If you ask me, they both have merits, but overall the Genesis version is the original one I played and what I believe to be the definitive one. Happy to say most people on the internet seem to agree with me. I've been wanting to do some Earthworm Jim related content for a while now. I loved the games when I was a kid, and I watched the cartoon, I had the toys. He's one of those characters I still want to root for a Smash edition. So plant that seed, internet. Until then, I'm stuck with Clay Fighter 63 1/3. Ugh. But today we're going to be taking a look at not only the first game, but also its sequel, seeing how they hold up under the retrospective spotlight. Now I know I make a big stink about this, and I do prefer playing games on their native hardware, but I don't have a Genesis or Super Nintendo at this point in my life, so I'm going to be playing these off Switch Online. But thankfully, the original is on Genesis and the sequel on SNES, so we get a little bit of both. This is analyzing everything about Earthworm Jim 1 and 2.
Groovy!
Booting up Earthworm Jim, you're automatically drawn into his charm with Jim flexing his mad muscles until his pants fall down. If that doesn't tell you what you're in for, maybe the squishy menu navigation sound effects will. The menu itself is pretty basic, nothing to write home about, so let's just get into it. Into the game we go! Right away you'll notice this game oozes style, and I mean that literally in some cases. You get a lot of bizarre 90s era art that really shines through, but even more than that, I think the combination of the art and animations pushes it over the edge. You get lots of cartoony, colorful creatures, most notably Jim himself, followed by the evil Psy-Crow, who is your archenemy. Crow, worm, you get the gist of it. You also have your pal Peter Puppy, who's this adorable dog, until he isn't. More enemies include Evil the Cat. I mean, he's an evil cat. Professor Monkey for a head, which is also pretty self-explanatory. Major Mucus, yes, a booger. Bob the Killer Goldfish. Chuck and Fifi. Queen Slug for a butt. And rounding out the cast with the damsel who needs saving, good old Princess What's-Her-Name. Then you have your basic enemies that change throughout each level to match the level theme. But before I get into levels, let's talk about that gameplay. It's a platformer. Jim jumps, he runs, he climbs, he has a ray gun for blasting, and he can actually rip his worm body out of the super suit and use it like a whip and a grapple to swing. It's sometimes hard to hit, but it's satisfying when it does. He also has a copter ability, so he can sort of glide a bit. So, you know, the usual. Jim has a lot of charm even with his basic abilities. Focusing a bit on his ray gun, he has a counter in the bottom corner that tells you how much ammo you have. It seems like a lot, but if you're anything like me, you'll find yourself running out at the worst times and trying to compensate. It does recharge once it's done, but only to 100. They do scatter ammo across the stages, but dang, you'll run out at some point. You'll also be on the lookout for your little health atoms. These are scattered throughout the stage, and you'll basically need these every second. So just go find them, just grab them. Grab as many as you can. You'll need them, trust me. On top of the normal gameplay, you'll get a wider variety of levels that play totally different. Like you get Andy Asteroids, where you race Psy-Crow to the next planet through asteroids. You'll have to avoid the asteroids and pick up shields or speed boosts to beat him, but you can also collect all these little bubble things that are evidently fuel pods and give you a bonus at the end if you collect enough. Personally, I flew through these levels with no trouble, but evidently if you fail, you have to battle Psy-Crow. I had to go back to experience that because I never failed to win the race. I mean, not to say I didn't fail per se, but if I did, it's because I blew up, not because I finished last. Aside from the asteroids, you get things like bungee jumping against a booger, and arguably the hardest level in the game for Pete's sake. You have to help your pal get over obstacles and traverse through the level. If you miss anything, your cute, sweet, lovable pup of a friend gets angry and turns into a raging Hulk-like gremlin and will unalive you. It's a super hard level and not for the faint of heart. In fact, generally you could say this about the entire game. Earthworm Jim is not easy. It takes you back to the day where games weren't long, but to make them feel bigger, they made them stupid hard, and this is no exception. If I wasn't playing this on Switch Online, I wouldn't have had the rewind function or save states, which really helped me out at certain points. So I definitely would recommend playing it on that, especially in a modern setting. It looks good. You can even get the controllers for the specific consoles, so why not? I think a lot of the difficulty comes from not being certain what your objective is within levels, so let's move on and chat about the level design. As far as the aesthetic of all levels, I can't imagine anything more 90s. I absolutely adore everything about it. They look cool, they're themed around boogers, poop, space, and even heck. All the bosses fit right into them. What's tricky about these levels is what I stated earlier. You'll find yourself wandering looking for your goal or a way to progress. Sometimes it's as easy as a grapple point you missed, but other times it's, hey, stand on this gem and run in a direction. It's not really obvious. Part of me hates it, but a part of me also found it very satisfying when I did solve it and progressed. The levels also aren't straightforward, side to side. They go up and down as well, which is pretty cool, and I feel it really adds to exploring. It kind of makes it a cross between the likes of Donkey Kong Country and a Metroidvania style game. It's pretty dope. Now, not all levels are created equal. Like I said, some are more challenging, but honestly, the only level I disliked was Down the Tubes, just because I found it really hard to navigate in these little glass submarine things, so much so that I was getting so frustrated I wanted to quit. They also don't really tell you to fill them with air with these things on the stage, which made me feel like I was racing against the clock until I figured it out. But, like all challenges, I confronted it head on and screamed, I don't quit, and I don't run, and I will be Hokage, believe it! Also, the music helped. I found it very 90s feeling again. It's simple, but effective. There are no true standout tracks that I think to myself, hey, I'm cruising down the street, I'm gonna put on some tunes. But you get this often familiar Sega Genesis vibe that just makes you remember your childhood and the satisfaction of knowing you defeated the evil cat from heck. The sound effects, I think, take it over the top, however. From everything like the subtle ray gun blasting noises to the whip of his head and cows going moo, Earthworm Jim has some great sound design. I've heard that the SNES version has the better music, but the Genesis is where the sound design shines. I mean, what's better than beating a hard booger boss by bungee jumping against him and getting a satisfying giant Earthworm Jim head yelling, groovy! Speaking of bosses, they're great, honestly. All of them have so much charm. I briefly mentioned a bunch of characters at the beginning, but each boss is just awesome. Billy the Bin is the first boss, and he's a giant robot made out of trash. What's not to love? Previously mentioned Major Mucus, we have to bungee against. This boss definitely sticks out to me among the bunch. Bob the Killer Goldfish is hilarious, you just knock him off a table. Psychro has probably my favorite design of the bunch, and he's the de facto archenemy to Jim. Queen Slug for a butt wasn't a challenge to me. Easy. Evil the Cat was tricky, but I conquered him because I have a way with cats. They love me. Professor Monkey for a head, he's just hilarious. The thing I love about all these bosses is just the absolute charm they radiate, which Earthworm Jim as a whole has. It has that it factor that makes people look fondly and latch onto it, so when they post their bios on their socials, they say, Earthworm Jim is my personality. And although the game is hard, it definitely has a lot of fantastic qualities that set it above a lot of games at the time. And that gave me just enough willpower to push through Earthworm Jim, save the princess, and complete the game, and immediately play the sequel right after. Into the sequel we go! Earthworm Jim 2 is everything you loved about the first one, and in my opinion, better in just about every way. They capped the difficulty a bit, so it doesn't feel as impossible, but at the same time still challenging. It just strikes a better balance, I think. While the gameplay remains largely the same, you get a slightly different moveset here with the introduction of Snot, your little booger buddy. He launches out of your backpack and you can swing from these goopy booger-looking patches scattered throughout the levels. He also replaces your copter by allowing him to be used as a parachute. I think it's easier to use and really helpful versus the copter in the first game. Earthworm Jim 2 also offers alternative weapons, which I think is a cool addition that helps offer a bit more variety. You get the Mega Plasma Gun, a 3-finger gun that works like your ray gun but fires in 3 directions, homing missiles that lock onto your enemies, and the totally useless bubble gun, and the Electro Gun, which is actually used on a different level that you have to blast the dirt and dig through to finish. It's a cool concept, but I'm glad it was only like one level. And you get the Barn Blaster that obliterates everything in sight. I also feel the animations were polished even further and have given it an even more cartoony style. You can really notice this on levels like Puppy Love, which involve more Peter the Puppy. Psychro is throwing his pups out a window and you have to save them by bouncing them on this drum thing to a vacuum where Peter sucks them up. Eventually Psychro throws a bomb, and once you get it into the tube, Peter grabs it and throws it back at him. I personally think the sound design is just as strong. I wouldn't say it's stronger, but it's comparable. The music, on the other hand, is way more memorable in Earthworm Jim 2. Even from the initial boot up, you can notice it. It's somehow silly, yet keeps that 90s flair and what made the first game special, then brought it up a level. One thing that's hilarious is this game emphasizes cows. Like, they are everything. While it was a thing in Earthworm Jim 1, they play a main part in the sequel, replacing the original Victory Groovy screen with a "Well done." It's a bit jarring at first, but then you realize it's just silly. You'll find even a specific level about alien UFOs abducting cows, and you have to hatch them from plants and bring them to a stall where they can be milked to fill a bucket to weigh down a scale to open a gate. And if you think that sounds ridiculous, sometimes the cows will have little ignition wires and you have to dunk them into giant bathtubs to put it out before they explode. Yep. Next level stuff right there. It was the 90s, baby. And a lot of other levels do some great things as well. You have a level entirely based off of food. And there's even one where you race against Psychro. From start to finish, Earthworm Jim felt like an absolute pleasure to play. I liked it, dare I say loved it, from the beginning accordion playing to rescuing the princess yet again. This game is a gem, and one you don't want to miss. It's also more balanced than the first, with a lot of the cast returning. Oh, and it gets weird. Really weird. Funky. I know this is a unique video because I did 2 games at once, but I felt they were very similar enough to warrant one video, while just pointing out the minor differences between the two. Plus, you could beat both of these in a day if you really wanted to, assuming you're good and not terrible at video games, but I wouldn't fault you for not finishing the first one because it can be tough. I will now rate the games on my legendary scale of Pop-Tarts. Earthworm Jim 1 gets an 8 out of 10 Pop-Tarts and their frosted brown sugar cinnamon because it leaves just a sweet little taste in your mouth when you beat it. Earthworm Jim 2, however, gets a whopping 9 out of 10 Pop-Tarts, and these are frosted cookies and cream because the sweetness lingers on even after you're done with it. Earthworm Jim 1 and 2 are games that have a lot of charm and heart. They'll take you back to the 90s. If the second game was that much better than the first, I can't wait to see how much better the third installment will be. Well, that's all I have for you. Please drop a like in this video. It tells the YouTube robots you liked my video, and they'll beep boop this video out to others. Until next time, have a good one.
Jake, you look back!